After providing them with medical assistance, Cuban authorities have initiated the repatriation process of a group of Haitians who were washed up on the country's shores in September. Former Argentine President Mauricio Macri missed a hearing on Thursday in which he was to be questioned about the alleged spying on the relatives of 44 sailors who died in the sinking of a Navy submarine. World Health Organization Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus announced the launch of a strategy to achieve global COVID-19 vaccination by mid-2022. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. We've been in Cuba, where a group of Haitians who were washed up on the country's shores in September as they attempted to reach the United States have received medical attention and also care before their repatriation. The group, which was traveling in makeshift boats, landed in the municipality of Maicí in the eastern Cuban province of Guantanamo due to bad weather conditions and attempting to reach the United States or the Bahamas. Government officials stated that 350 of the 421 Haitians that have been cared of and cared for at a special camp since their arrival will be repatriated with the first group, while the others will return home at a later date.
They have received very good treatment. According to the possibilities, the food was very good and the attention and affection of all the people there. In fact, many of them do not want to leave. They want to stay.
And we'll remain on topic. Panama's judicial and forensic authorities declare an emergency due to a large number of asylum seekers' corpses found in the jungle of the Darien Gap, the region, as thousands of people continue to make the dangerous journey to the United States. The Legal Medicine and Forensic Institute has registered over 50 deaths in the Panamanian border zone. The only two morgues in the area are overwhelmed, and the authorities are requesting international assistance for the creation of a humanitarian cemetery. The director of the institute believes that the number of deaths is only going to increase, with forecasts of over 20,000 people said to attempt to cross the dangerous jungle from Colombia. Panamanian authorities reiterated that the northern border is experiencing a humanitarian crisis. Over 88,000 asylum seekers arrived in the territory, and different sources have registered violent attacks against them, as well as fatal accidents and diseases.
The corpses we find can be someone's brother, someone's father, someone's son, and it is our obligation to handle those bodies in a humane, respectful, ethical manner and within the legal framework. That is why, together with 6 CDR, we are working on the handling of corpses, the burial according to international standards and protocols. For the Institute of Forensic Medicine, our response capabilities have been overwhelmed. That is why we are going to propose the support we require with forensic experts with the help in the design of a humanitarian cemetery in order to give Christian burial to all these people.
Chilean social movements led by student organizations have called to mobilize on Friday in the wake of revelations surrounding President Sebastián Piñera contained in the Pandora Papers investigation. On calling for protests in the capital Santiago, students' leaders made clear that Piñera's actions were unacceptable, on evading his public responsibility to pay its taxes when leading to the nation, while the country's public works, the projects and poorest sectors suffered the ongoing economic crisis aggravated by the pandemic. Piñera made backroom deals using Chile's resources for his own double agenda, making himself even richer at the expense of the nation. This, in addition to his role covering up years of institutionalized corruption and police brutality. A United States judge has temporarily blocked the new law in Texas that effectively bans women from having an abortion. District Judge Robert Pittman granted a request by the Biden administration to prevent any enforcement of the law while its legality is being challenged. Texan officials immediately appealed against the ruling, setting the stage for further court battles.
Since SB 8 was implemented, it has wreaked havoc in Texas. So we are thrilled that the district court judge recognized the gravity of the harm and protected Texans' right under the Constitution to an abortion. The federal district court judge recognized the risk this posed to other constitutional and federal rights, and recognized that because of that, the Department of Justice had grounds to bring a lawsuit. The district court judge recognized the gravity of the constitutional violations that have been happening at this point for over a month. So we expect and we hope that the Court of Appeals that now has the DOJ case before it, and certainly the Supreme Court, would protect this constitutional right as it has been protected for almost 50 years.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Former Argentine President Mauricio Macri missed a hearing on Thursday in which he was to be questioned about the alleged spying on the relatives of 44 sailors who died in the sinking of a Navy submarine. According to the leader of Macri's Republican Proposal Party, Patricia Bullrich, the former president, who led Argentina from 2015 to 2019, could not attend the court session because he was out of the country on international businesses and will return in late October. In her letter to the court, Bullrich asked the magistrate to avoid any hasty decisions that could worsen the coverage of the case in the media. Macri is accused of ordering, allowing, organizing, and executing the systematic carrying out of intelligence tasks, expressly prohibited by law between December 2017 and the end of 2018. He could face a potential prison sentence of between 3 and 10 years if he is found guilty of violating Argentina's national intelligence law, although in this case, aggravating circumstances could also be considered. Senators in the United States have agreed to extend the country's debt ceiling less than 2 weeks before the threat of a default. Disagreements over the ceiling, that is, the limit on how much the government can borrow, are not new in politics, also in the U.S., but the current draw between Republicans and Democrats has sparked concern in the financial markets, with fears that the U.S. will default on its national debt. Senate Majority Leader Democrat Chuck Schumer said on Thursday that lawmakers had reached a deal to extend the debt ceiling until early December. The announcement came after what Schumer's Republican counterpart, Mitch McConnell, said were negotiations in good faith that had continued through the night. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has stressed that his government will not grant any concessions to private or foreign firms to exploit lithium in Mexico, as the mineral is considered strategic to the nation. On October 1st, the president proposed a constitutional reform to Congress, which will see the state control the mining of lithium, an indispensable mineral for electric car batteries, and the development of new technologies. On Thursday, López Obrador stressed that if the reform is not passed, no new concessions will be granted, as the valuable resource must be in the hands of the nation. The president also detailed that there are currently 8 concessions granted for the exploitation of lithium that will remain in force, as long as the companies prove that they are about to start production. The proposed constitutional reform also ensures that the state-owned Federal Electricity Commission will keep 54% of the sector's market, compared to 46% for the private sector. López Obrador has strongly criticized the participation of private initiative in the energy sector. A rally was held in Syria in front of the United Nations mission in Damascus to support the Palestinians living inside and outside occupied Palestine at a time when Washington and Tel Aviv employ all the means at their disposal to suppress the rights of the Palestinian people. Our correspondent Hisham Wanus has the details.
The armed struggle is the only way to liberate Palestine and recover the usurped rights of the Palestinian people, starting with the right of return of the refugees. This was stated by the leader of the different Palestinian factions based in Damascus in an act to celebrate the 24th anniversary of the founding of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement. which occurred on October the 6th, the same day of the 48th anniversary of the October Liberation War. We pledge to continue the resistance and jihad because the armed struggle, jihad and the resistance are the only way to achieve victory, freedom and liberation of Palestine, and thus the closure of all refuge camps after the inevitable return of the refugees to their homeland from the diaspora camps. We hope that in the next stage, the mobilization of the Palestinian resistance movement will expand further and gain more strength to continue the struggle with more momentum, especially after the change in the balance of forces imposed by the resistance after its victory in the recent Battle of the Sword of Al-Quds in the occupied Palestinian territories. At the same time, the Palestinian factions organized a sit-in in front of the UN headquarters in Damascus to condemn the framework agreement signed last July between Washington and the United Nations for Palestinian refugees. They condemned this agreement, by which the United States administration, in support of the Zionist regime in Tel Aviv, conditions its financial support to the United Nations on considering members of the Palestinian Liberation Army and other Palestinian factions operating in Syria as terrorists who should not receive any assistance whatsoever. The mission of this agency is to help and assist the Palestinian people and not to be used as a tool in the hands of the United States to implement its Zionist plans to eliminate our rights of return, and therefore we condemn this agreement that seeks to deprive us of our legitimate right to fight against the occupation, and we denounce the UNRWA has not fulfilled its responsibilities in the last 10 years with regard to the Palestinian refugees in Syria. In addition to depriving the Palestinian resistance fighters of the UNRWA assistance, the agreement stipulates that only displaced Palestinians born before 1948, amounting to 40,000 people, more than half of whom have died, and not their children and grandchildren, accounting for 5,700,000 people, should be considered as refugees eligible for UNRWA assistance, another attempt to achieve the same objective as the failed US Zionist plan to eliminate the rights of return by using terrorism to displace the Palestinian refugees in Syria to the confines of the world for the second time.
هشام والنوس تلسور دمشق سوريا.
Now we address other topics. At least 4 people have been killed as northern regions of China see heavy rainfall. The extreme weather has caused rivers to burst their banks, reaching their highest levels in 40 years. Firefighters and soldiers have led evacuation efforts after hundreds of homes were destroyed in Shanxi province. An undetermined number of people have been injured. Authorities decreed a yellow alert given the risk of hazards linked to the downpours, such as landslides or the collapse of roads infrastructure. Additionally, tourist sites and coal mines in the region were closed. And a strong earthquake with a preliminary magnitude of 6.1 jolted the Japanese capital Tokyo and the surrounding areas late on Thursday. The quake, which struck close to 11 p.m. local time, stopped train lines and caused sporadic power cuts, but there were no reports of major damage. According to Japan's Met Agency, the tremor was registered as a strong 5 on Japan's intensity scale, a level that could cause some damage to buildings and power cuts. Its epicenter was in Chiba Prefecture, to the east of the capital. There was no danger of a tsunami from the quake, but the government set up an emergency response task force in the case. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. At a World Health Organization press briefing on the COVID-19 pandemic, the Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus announced the launch of a strategy to achieve global COVID-19 vaccination by mid-2022.
Today, WHO is launching the strategy to achieve global COVID-19 vaccination by mid-2022. The strategy outlines the road we must all take together to achieve our targets of vaccinating 40% of the population of every country by the end of this year and 70% by the middle of next year. Achieving these targets will require at least 11 billion vaccine doses. This is not a supply problem. It is an allocation problem.
Also speaking at the WHO press briefing on the COVID-19 pandemic, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed that maintaining unequal access to vaccines between rich and poor countries is not only immoral, but also stupid because it risks allowing the rise of variants resistant to current vaccines.
We have the risk if we let this lack of equity, if we leave it going on, and we allow for the virus to go on spreading like wildfire in the global south, there is a risk that one day, and that they can be very soon, there will be not the Delta, it will be another variant that will be able to resist vaccines. And all the vaccination effort made in developed countries to vaccinate the whole of their population, 1, 2, or 3 times, all that effort will fall apart. And these people will not be protected. It is clear for me that this is a case in which the well-being of humankind and the dramatic situation of the global economy would require not business as usual, but exceptional rules, exceptional norms, and exceptional measures in order to be able to defeat the COVID.
The whole number of COVID-19 cases in the United States has surpassed 44 million, with more than 3.5 million new infections reported during the past 24 days. According to a tally by Johns Hopkins University, by Wednesday evening, the nationwide death toll had reached almost 708,000, the highest in the world. California, Texas, Florida, and New York remain the hardest hit states. New coronavirus cases, hospitalizations, and fatalities are falling as the United States begins to recover from a persistent summer surge that strained hospitals across the country and killed over 100,000 in just 3.5 months. However, a large part of the population remains unvaccinated, posing the risk of a resurgence of the epidemic. Most of the COVID-19 deaths in the past 3 months were people who were unvaccinated, and about 68 million eligible people have yet to be inoculated, leaving the country vulnerable to continued surges. And the Irish government has agreed to sign up a 15% global minimum tax rate on multinational firms, leaving only Hungary as the last holdout against the international deal. The reform is aimed at stopping international corporations slashing tax bills by registering in nations with low rates. Finance ministers from the wealthy G7 nations endorsed a global minimum corporate tax rate of at least 50% in June, which was reached in the framework of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It was approved by the G20 in July and has also been signed by more than 130 countries. Ireland currently has a 12.5% tax rate, which has meant it attracted giants such as Apple and Google corporations away seeking to pay less tax.
This is the right decision. It is a sensible and a pragmatic decision made by the government in the interests of our country, and ultimately a decision that I believe will be critical to conditions to create longer-term certainty for businesses and investors, which in turn will be to the benefit of many thousands of employees in the future. Our focus over recent weeks has been to secure the necessary changes to provide certainty and stability in the revised framework and to protect our strategic interests. I believe we have now reached that point.
Morocco's King Mohammed VI on Thursday named a new government led by a billionaire tycoon close to the palace who will face pressing economic problems. New Prime Minister, businessman Aziz Askanouch, worth $2 billion according to Forbes, has led the National Rally of Independence Party since 2016, which won the elections held last month. His party is considered close to the palace and has been part of all coalition governments for the past 23 years, except during a brief period between 2012 and 2013. The 24-member cabinet is largely made up of technocrats, with veteran diplomat Nasser Bourida keeping his role as foreign minister in a context of regional tensions, especially with neighboring Algeria. Morocco's 2011 constitution transferred more powers from the monarchy to the government and parliament, but the king retains the final say on strategic issues and major projects. In addition, the new administration must be submitted for approval by the king, who reserves veto rights. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at teleserienglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.